9/11 started like any other day, kind of a routine day for everybody. Beautiful day.
She was watching the news and they broke in about a plane striking one of the buildings in New York.
And knowing that the casualty level is going to be high, it was just a sad situation.
At that time, about that time when we were looking at this, the second plane comes through.
Oh my goodness, what is happening? What does this mean?
They didn't know where the next one was going to hit, and of course it did. There was another one at the Pentagon.
Then the reality started setting in that, we'd just been attacked as a nation.
Our feeling of security had been taken away from us.
And I remember saying to the group, boys, get your guns and your uniforms, this is war.
So I was sitting there at my desk watching this, and my telephone rang, and it was my wife Donna, and she was so hysterical I couldn't understand her at first, and she finally calmed down enough to tell me that Adam was in one of those buildings. Just such a feeling of hopelessness and despair came over me. And I've been told later that I laid my head down on the table there, and everyone was just completely quiet. They didn't know what to say.
And of course, it took so long for any information to come down of status of anyone that was in the Twin Towers. And of course, he was calling, trying to find out, trying to verify if his son was actually in the building. The right thing to do was to send him home to be with his wife till they had information. So regardless of what the end result was, they were together when they did get information.
On that way home, I'll never forget this. Something just came over me, and I had such a feeling of calmness that I knew Adam was all right. I knew Adam was going to be okay, even if he didn't get out of the building.
They were evacuating the 61st floor. We all got in the stairwell and started on our way down. At about 8:55, they came over a public address system and said that the north tower had been hit by an aircraft, but that the south tower is secure, that we should go back to our offices. There were some pieces of paper flying around in the air. On the tops of some of the buildings below, there were small fires. You could see a lot of people moving away from the buildings at actual street level, and there were some fires on the ground level as well. The thought occurred to me right then, this may be a lot more serious than I had thought. And simultaneous with that thought was the sound, what I now know, didn't at the time know, that it was the sound of a jet engine throttling up and colliding into our building. And that created quite a violent vibration in the building, kind of like an explosion. As soon as that happened, I made my way immediately back to the stairwell I had just gotten out of, or had been in earlier, and started my way down. Things were pretty easy going down the stairwell until about that 43rd or 44th floor again. There was, as you can imagine, there was a bottleneck of people there. And that was the first time, I guess, it had been out of my control as to how quickly I could get out of the building. That's the first time I really had a sense of panic or a helpless feeling. But finally we made it out of the buildings. It looked to me that the building had no choice but to collapse. So I started making my way away from the building.
For the first time ever, we launched on September the 11th. I want to say it was Lieutenant Colonel, I think it was Mark Anderson, and I think it was Lieutenant Colonel Mike Heiser that launched, like the first two armed birds out of Fort Smith ever. I know they flew caps starting that night.
We went from a daily training flight mission to having 8 or 9 airplanes on alert status with live weapons in about 4 hours.
One of the big things we were trying to work out was the rules of engagement, because we knew if we got caught, it was more than likely a high potential anyway that we would have to maybe bring down a civilian airplane.
We flew presidential protection missions over the president wherever he was. We rotated in and out with other fighters. Tankers were airborne all the time. God bless those guys, they were airborne all the time. And you show up, you go get gas, and basically we own the skies.
For the first time since I can remember, I looked up in the sky and there were no airplanes. And the second day, just after it happened, the FAA came in and gave us permission to fly. And there were only 3 aircraft in the air in Arkansas that day. It was me trying to go get a cardiac patient and 2 F-16s that were watching me.
We were notified very quickly and given guidance on what to do with our aircraft. We stood down because we were in the training mission at that time, training combat airlifters at Little Rock Air Force Base. The initial missions that we incurred because of 9/11 were to man positions at the local airports for security.
When the towers were attacked, of course, no one had any idea if that was just the precursor to more widespread attacks on larger facilities, or if that was a precursor to a more in-depth attack. And so force protection measures, of course, went up extremely high. Our posture did, quite understandably. And the National Guard picked up the mission for airport security and several sites here in Arkansas. And of course, that varied by state, depending on what type of facility you had in your state.
We looked very closely and became very concerned about some of the vital installations across the state. Not that we hadn't already looked at them and that we were already concerned about their security, but all of a sudden, Arkansas Nuclear 1 and 2 became a very great concern.
And that night, we rolled down to Russellville, to Nuclear 1, to protect the facility. We had lots of ammo, lots of weapons, and state police.
And to go into that and watch our soldiers go into that and stay, I mean, literally 24 hours a day for weeks and months to guard that facility until they could get up to the level of security that they needed.
We had units that were called up to provide security at active duty bases, Little Rock Air Force Base, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Polk, Pine Bluff Arsenal, a number of places around the country. The 123rd Intelligence Squadron, they've been mobilized almost consistently ever since 9/11, providing intelligence support for the global war on terror.
And they were the very first unit that was called up during 9/11 and mobilized as a result of 9/11.
I think everybody in the brigade headquarters at that time knew that something was looming on the horizon for the 39th.
And I got a call from the commander of the 7th Infantry Division out of Fort Carson, Colorado, to tell me that I needed to select an infantry battalion to go perform the multinational force and observer mission in the Sinai.
The 2nd Battalion, the gunslingers were mobilized.
But their purpose was to free up an active duty infantry battalion that could go to Afghanistan.
I averaged between 40 and 100 personal phone calls a day talking to media outlets, different media from small radio stations, small newspapers in Arkansas, up to all the different television stations. And that was just because I was the one individual who would answer calls on what the Guard was doing.
Always ready to either serve the state in time of emergency or disaster or serve the nation.
No one imagined that we'd still be at war 10, 11 years later.
Oh, I think September 11th, I mean, you can almost put that as a milestone of things started changing drastically after that.
I never expected to go overseas when I joined the National Guard.
The people that are coming in now, it's not a matter of if you're going to get deployed, it's a matter of when you're going to get deployed.
But I really knew that we were going to be leaving. We were all like shipped out all through Iraq.
It really demonstrates about citizen soldiers that you have people who have a civilian career, in some cases have mobilized 3 times.
No, I've been to Saudi, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Iraq twice.
It was very challenging for us.
To look at families, to talk to families in the face, in the light of the loss of their loved one through combat casualty. That's the most difficult thing I've ever done.
Every soldier pays a sacrifice with the deployment. Being away from their family, away from their friends, away from their life and their careers.
We've got the men and women in uniform all over the world doing a great job making sure this doesn't happen again.
This country has always called on its military, and the military has always responded, but it certainly doesn't make it easy.